these links also need to be in their own wrapper class. So here I'm going to create a class called nav-link wrapper. Notice this is different than nav wrapper. This is nav link wrapper. So it's specific to that. And then I'm just going to close that div off and put that inside of it. And then I'm going to use the exact same div here, or this, I should say, the same class here. And then down below, this one's going to be a little bit different. Now I'm going to create a different class name because if you notice, we have different styles here. These links have a different look and feel slightly than this brand. So these styles are going to be related to links. These styles are going to be related to text. So I'm just going to call this brand. Close that off, indent it. And that is the full structure that we're going to use for our nav bar in HTML. So now that we have that, I think that our page is definitely at the spot where it needs some styles because this is starting to look pretty ugly. So now let's make some magic happen with the styles. So I'm going to come here and let's get rid of all of that code. And now I'm going to start with the nav wrapper. I'm going to start pretty much top to bottom. So you can see here we have the nav wrapper up at the top. And then from there, we move down to left side, nav link wrapper, right side, and brand. So we're going to add styles to each of those. And that's going to give us a perfect opportunity to learn about Flexbox. Flexbox is a tool inside of CSS that allows us to align our elements on the page in a much more straightforward manner than used to be possible. So let's start off by getting that nav wrapper. So I'm going to say nav-wrapper. And then inside of here, I'm going to say display, colon, and then flex. So what that is going to do is let's go really quick to here and see exactly what we have going on. So now you can see something kind of interesting. You notice how by just adding that one style rule, it moved the name, that brand class, to the right-hand side. So the way that Flexbox works is it takes your wrapper divs. And so if you come here, so you can see with nav wrapper, notice here how inside of it, even though you see a lot of code here, technically there are only two divs. We only have our left side and our right side. Now inside of left side, we have multiple divs, but the way Flexbox looks at things, it completely ignores everything inside of the child elements. So what we can do is we can say, I want you to apply flex styles to nav wrapper, which means that just by default, it is no longer going to have the elements stacking on top of each other. Instead, they're going to be on next to each other, like left side and right side, exactly like how we have right here. So now that we have that in place, we can start to add some other styles. So here I'm going to say justify content and then space between. Now this is going to do something pretty cool. It's actually going to do pretty much exactly what it says. It is going to justify the content, and the way it's going to justify it is by spacing it out using all of the open space in between. So now if you come and hit refresh, you can see that it took all the open space and it's now using that for justifying that div. So that is pretty cool. Now let's come and let's also add some padding. And so for this padding, I'm going to go with 38 pixels. I'll hit save. And what that's going to do, what padding does, and you can see in our little box right here, you can see the diagram for how padding works. It has margin in the far end of the box, then it has whatever your border is, then it has padding, and everything inside of that is your actual content. So when I said I want you to take what is right here, and I want you to add 38 pixels to it. Right now it has 0 pixels. So this is going to increase this by quite a bit. And if I hit refresh, you can see that now we have space where we didn't before. So that is the full set of styles for the nav wrapper. Now let's go and add styles to that left side class. And here we're going to say display flex, because as you may have noticed right here, these two items are sitting on top of each other, but in the final version, we want to have them right next to each other. So display flex allows us to do that. So if you now hit refresh, you can see they are right next to each other. So we've seen how we can select single items, but now let's see how we can actually traverse down a tree. So I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to start with our nav wrapper, and then I'm going to use the greater than sign. So I'm going to say I want you to start with the nav wrapper class. I want you to select that, but I want you to apply these styles to it. Next, I want you to go down to the left side. And then I want you to grab the divs inside of there. So how that's going to work in the HTML is it's going to look at the nav wrapper. Then it's going to go down to the left side. Then it's going to grab any divs inside of there. And whatever styles I'm about to give are going to be placed on those divs. So that is the way you can traverse a tree in CSS. So you grab each one of those objects and tell it exactly which one you want to work with. So here I'm going to add some margin right. So I'm going to say 20 pixels because you saw how they were right next to each other. And then I'm going to do a font size of 0.9 M. This is the way M works is it's a percent of what it normally would be. So by default, the font size is 1 M. So I'm going to say 0.9, which means about 90%. So now if we come back, hit refresh, you can see that now we have this nice spacing and the font size is there. Now you may have noticed that right here with the brand that I have it in all caps. And here we have all caps for home, about, and the brand. Well, I did that on purpose. I wanted to show you that you don't have to actually type the code out in the HTML in all caps. You can use CSS to do that as well. So if you want, you could put in what's called a text transform and then say uppercase. Now you have some other options too. You could see when I did that, you had a few other ones. I think downcase was one, and there were a few other options, but uppercase is what we want here. Now if I hit refresh, you can see that that automatically converted these so that they were in their uppercase state. And we use CSS to do it. The HTML itself was not changed. This still says home, about, and it's in its normal case. So that is that. It's our left side. Now inside of the left side, we have that little nav link wrapper. So let's add some styles there. So I'm going to say dot nav link wrapper. I am going to add a height. So this is going to be a height of 22 pixels. Then I'm going to do something that may look a little weird, but I'm going to explain it here in a second. I'm going to add a border bottom here that is of 1 pixel, solid, but then it's transparent. So in other words, you're not actually going to see it. And the reason for that is going to be made apparent here in a minute. And then we're going to also see how animations work in CSS. So I'm going to add a transition, and this transition is going to call whatever part we want to add the animation to. So I want to animate the border. So I'm going to say transition border bottom, and then here I'll say for this one 0.5s, which means half a second. Now, nothing's going to happen here yet. So if I hit refresh, all that's really going to change are the style elements. What we're doing is we're setting up the styles so that they can have this kind of behavior. They can have that cool little fade in, the colors can change, there's no jumping, anything like that. So this is what we're looking for instead of what we have there right now. So now that we have our